Good morning, fourth graders. Today in math, we're going to be reviewing word problems and fractions. All of this should be review, but I will go over the first problem with you just to give you an example of what your answer should look like. Then you can pause the video and try the rest on your own. The first problem says, the cafeteria workers at Polk Elementary are making special cookies for the students on the last day of school. The recipe calls for 5/9 of a pound of brown sugar and 6/8 of a pound of white sugar. Do the cookies have more brown sugar or white sugar? Explain your reasoning. So to solve this problem, there are a couple different strategies that you could use. You could make two fractions that have the same denominator and then compare the numerator. You could try drawing a picture, but by looking at 5/9 and 6/8, I don't think my picture would be very clear because they're going to be very similar. They're going to be very close. So I think for my solution for this problem, I am going to try and make two fractions that have the same denominator. So if I have 5/9 and I have 6/8, and I want to turn these two fractions into a fraction where they have the same denominator, so then I can just compare my numerators to figure out which is more. I could just multiply my two denominators together, and that would guarantee me a common denominator. So I know 9 times 8 is 72. So that would be my denominator for both of these. In order to turn 5/9 into an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 72, I need to ask myself, what did I multiply 9 by to turn it into 72? I multiplied it by 8. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And I know that 5 times 8 is 40. On the opposite side, what did I do to turn 8 into 72? I multiplied it by 9. Whatever you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And I know 6 times 9 is 54. And this shows me that now I can compare 54 over 72 and 40 over 72. And I can see that 54 over 72 is more because the numerator is larger. So for my answer to this question, I know that my cookies have more white sugar because I had 6/8 of a pound of white sugar. So my answer is, do the cookies have more brown sugar or white sugar? The cookies have more white sugar, and I know this because I made equivalent fractions with equivalent denominators. All right, this would be a great place to pause the video, try the rest of these problems on your own, and then come on back and check your answers when you're done. The next question on the first page says, Jonas and Liam are cleaning out their desks at the end of the year. Jonas fills 3/9 of a recycle bin with old papers. When Liam adds his papers, the bin is completely full. What fraction of the recycling bin is full of Liam's papers? So for this one, I can imagine that a recycling bin is sort of like one hole, and Jonas filled up 3/9 of that. So I need to figure out what was left after Jonas added his papers to the recycling bin. And when I figure out what was left, that'll tell me how much Liam had added. So here you could do a subtraction problem, or you could even draw a picture. So if I subtracted, I would need to turn the number 1 into the fraction of 9 over 9, because that equals 1. And then I would need to subtract 3/9, and I would get 6/9. If you drew a picture, you could sort of draw your recycle bin and break it into 9ths. And then we can shade in the 3/9 that Jonas filled up. And we can see that there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6/9 left for Liam to add his papers. So Liam filled 6/9 of the bin. For page 2, the first question says, for the end of the year party, Principal Mendrose brought 6 giant bags of candy. Each bag had 538 pieces. So 6 bags, each had 538 pieces of candy in it. How many pieces of candy are there all together? So I'm just going to be multiplying to find my answer to this one. 538 times 6. I set up my multiplication problem. I always multiply starting in the bottom number in the ones place. And I multiply directly up. 6 times 8 is 48. 6 times 3 is 18. Plus 4 is 22. 6 times 5 is 30. Plus 2 is 32. So the principal bought 3,228 pieces of candy. All right, the next question says, Mr. Reyes is asking his class about their summer plans. Of the students, 3/9 are going to visit the beach, and 2/9 are going to visit the mountains. What fraction of the class is either going to the beach or the mountains? So this is asking me what fraction is going to the beach or the mountains, so I need to combine those two fractions together. So I'm going to add 3/9 and 2/9. When I add fractions, my denominator always stays the same, and I add my two numerators together to get 5. So 5/9 of the students are going to the beach or the mountains. Notice as I'm writing my answers, I'm writing complete answers where I'm labeling each answer that I found. Okay, let's take a look at the third page. On the third page, the first question says, 2 friends are signing yearbooks at their class's end-of-year party. Reuben takes 35/100ths of a minute to sign his name. Jace takes 4/10ths of a minute. Determine who takes longer to sign his name. Explain your reasoning. So for this problem, we need to compare 0.35 and 0.4 to figure out which one is longer. When I'm comparing decimals like this, like I said, it's always helpful to stack them up and make sure that you're lining up your decimal so that each place value is lined up. You start by comparing from the left to the right. So starting with the largest, they both have no ones, and then you move over to the next one. So it took Reuben 3/10ths of a second, and it took Jace 4/10ths of a second. So I can tell this one already is larger. I don't want you to be confused by that though, because you might be saying, but Mrs. Smith, this one says 35 and this one only says 4. But remember, here we have a 0 placeholder technically. So if you're thinking of money, this is like saying 35 cents and this is like saying 40 cents. And 40 cents is more than 35 cents. So don't just immediately jump to the conclusion that 35 is longer or takes longer. So to answer this question, I'm going to say that it takes Jace longer to sign his name. All right, the next question says, at the end of the school year, Jenny sees that she has lost 4/10ths of her markers. What 2 fractions are equivalent to this fraction? So for this one, we just need to find equivalent fractions to 4/10ths. So I know that when I'm finding equivalent fractions, I can either multiply my numerator and denominator by the same number, or I can divide my numerator and denominator by the same number. So I think I want to actually start by dividing. I'm going to divide both the numerator and the denominator by 2. I know 4 divided by 2 is 2, and 10 divided by 2 is 5 rather. So she lost 2/5 of her marker. And then I need to find another equivalent fraction, so I'll start with 4/10ths again, and this time I'll double it. So I'll multiply by 2, so my new numerator will be 8, and my new denominator will be 20. So Jenny could have said she lost 2/5 of her markers or 8/20 of her markers. And your answers might be different depending on if you multiplied or divided and what you also multiplied and divided by. On to the last page. The first problem on the last page says, families are being seated for the 5th grade graduation party. There are 27 rows of seating with 22 seats in each row. How many total seats are there for families to sit in? So in order to solve this problem, I'm just going to multiply. I know 27 times 22 would give me how many total seats that there are. If I did 27 times 22, 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. My 0 placeholder. And I erase anything that I carried. 2 times 7 is 14. 2 times 2 is 4 plus 1 is 5. And then I add my numbers together. So there are 594 chairs. As always, notice that I'm labeling each of my answers. The very last problem, Miss Wilkins is the custodian at West Glen Elementary School. He is waxing the gym floor at the end of the year. The floor is a rectangle with a width of 50 feet and a length of 81 feet. What is the area of the gym floor? So if you think back when we talked about area and perimeter, area is all the space that something takes up on the inside, and it's usually measured in like square feet or square inches. And perimeter is the length of distance around the outside edge, something like a fence. If you put up a fence, how long would that fence be to go all the way around it? So this problem is asking us to find the area, which is all the space inside the gym floor. So I know that it has a width of 50 and a length of 81. And in order to find the area, I just need to multiply the length times the width. Seeing as I used the traditional algorithm on the last problem, I think for this one I will do lattice multiplication. All right, so now I multiply 5 times 8 is 40. 0 times 8 is 0. 0 times 1 is 0. 5 times 1 is 5. And I add my diagonals. Ooh, this is a really friendly problem to solve. So I got 4,050. So I know that the area of the gym floor is 4,050 square feet. All right. As always, reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you all have a wonderful day today.